Good afternoon. My name is Jack Lesniak. I've been around this building at Unity Temple 35 or 40 years in various capacities. Started out around early 1980s being involved in Architectural Advisory Committee, it was called then. It was a group of architects that met to advise UTRF on what projects they need to do and how, hopefully at some point restore the building. That took quite a long time to accomplish, and I'm pretty proud that I was at the end when it actually did happen. Early on, the Architectural Advisory Committee had people like John Thorpe was chair for a while, Mal Scavarella, Paul Rudolph. It was a group of architects that we actually met at lunch in downtown Chicago to have meetings to talk about this building. Eventually that morphed into the Architectural Restoration Committee, which for a while John Thorpe was the chair, and he was also happened to be the chair for the Restoration Committee at the Home and Studio in Oak Park. And I was also on that committee. And around 1999, Roby House had finally considered reconstituting their Home and Studio Restoration Committee to work on the Roby House restoration. And John wanted to be part of that again and be chair of it. So he asked me to take over the Unity Temple Restoration Committee. And that was late 90s, about 99, I think. And so I was the chair of the committee from then until 2013. In that time, I experienced a lot of things in this building. Several repairs to the outside, especially the overhangs, which really got its initial start when a chunk of concrete fell onto the ground from above. And which surprised a lot of people, and that started a concerted effort on an interior investigation of just what the status of the ceilings in the temple were, and a lot of work was done. And even for a time, we had a structural engineer actually come in and sound all the ceilings in this temple. And some of you may remember that the ceiling was covered with plywood for a time because a lot of the loose plaster had been removed, and that eventually got into being part of the restoration of the entire building. There were other events like we think a homeless person got up into the skylight here in the temple and actually opened up one of the ley lights and dropped a bucket of tar down that actually hit one of the hanging light fixtures here and broke the globe in one of the cubes, and that had to be restored. And it took a while to figure out just exactly what happened, because one morning Emily Roth came in, who was the executive director at the time, and was surprised to find all this glass and debris on the floor in the temple. And after a while, we determined that somebody had climbed the exterior scaffolding that had been set up to repair some of the outside overhangs, and had gotten into the skylight area. The building is it's part of my life after being here for a long time, and I always feel a sense of calm when I come into the temple. I'm kind of proud that I was able to be here for the restoration and see it completed. We could not have done it without a lot of help through volunteers and through donations and memberships, and it kept this group going for a long time until we were able to raise enough money to actually do the restoration. And there's some important people that made it successful. Not to mention, we had a good relationship with Mark Nussbaum, the engineer who designed the in-ground heating and cooling system, and of course Gunny Harbaugh, who was our restoration architect, who has been, I think, a blessing to this structure since we hired him way back in early 2000s.
How long is the process for a restoration project? So something like the plaster, that fell through the ceiling. It's not as though you guys can just run to Home Depot and fix it in a couple weeks. What typically happens?
The restoration itself, well, the master plan was the start, and that took a couple of years to actually finish. And then from there, of course, we had to raise the money, and when we were sure that the money was in line for it, then there was a period of about a year that the information in the master plan was tested. There was a lot of work to actually determine what the plaster finish would be, how that plaster would be applied, whether it would be all new plaster or plaster over a sub-base or just a thin veneer, and could we get the color and could we get the texture that we wanted, and then compare the prices of that and see what was the most looked the best and the most economical for what needed to be done. Same thing with the heating and cooling systems. All of that had to be checked out and tested. So there was about a year of above ground, I would say, investigation of just proving that what was in the master plan could be done. And it was a way of getting a contractor on board to actually put together a budget and a cost, so we knew was it going to be $10 million or was it going to be $100 million. We had to narrow it down somewhat. So the process is a long one. And then of course the actual restoration was just amazing. This building was completely gutted. Everything was taken out. It was, in some areas it was down below the face of the wall. I mean, they took the plaster off in most of the places and replaced it with a representation of what it actually was originally. And all of the woodwork had been removed, all the pews, all the light fixtures. If you walked in here, you would think we could never bring it back to what it was. And that was part of the miracle of this process, to actually see it done. Same thing with the exterior. A lot of work went on the exterior to repair a lot of the plaster that, concrete that had been applied back in the 70s. And especially that was what was falling off the building. And also to try and meld it in with what was there that was solid and acceptable. So, and to do it without looking like it was a patchwork quilt throughout was an amazing process.
You said something when you first came in here today and we were deciding where you wanted to film, and you said something about being in this space. It was special to you. Do you want to elaborate a little bit?
This room just gives me a feeling of calm when I walk into it, and it's a special room too. It's one you can walk around, but I think if you visit the temple itself, one needs to sit in, let's say, sit in a pew, but then get up and move to one of the balconies and get a different view, and then go up to the third level and sit there too. I've been here during performances where UTRF would put on a Japanese dance or something, and I would move from one area of the building to another just to get a different view. And when you're up on a third level, it's like their architecture engulfs you, and you start to see things you haven't seen before. How can this man think in almost 4 dimensions when he's designing something? It's just amazing to me. That's my experience with this building. And from the outside, it may look simple, but it's one of the most complicated structures, especially for 1905 to 1908 when it was built. There's a lot of mystery in it, just exactly how it was designed.
That's excellent. And I'll give you a minute to wrap up if you'd like anything else, any other stories to tell or any other memories. But I just want to say, Jack, it's folks like yourself who've been dedicated to this building for so many years, providing, I can't even imagine, countless hours of free consultation with architecture and engineering, and we wouldn't be where we were today without all of you and without all of our members and donors who have contributed so generously to our efforts. And now that the building looks so amazing and so much work has been done, we just need to keep it that way. And already we're starting to see some punch lists come together of some small repairs that need to happen. So UTRF is building a capital reserve so we can fund larger projects moving on in the future. So membership fees, donations, everything helps us run our organization, but even more importantly, keep this building in this kind of condition for many more years to come. So if you're interested in becoming a member and you're not already, just go to utrf.org/membership. Any last words you'd like to say?
Well, the building's over 100 years old. Let's donate and make sure it can go on for another 100